Welcome back to a special edition of a preview show.
Preview show.
Yeah, I know. I'm Casey Campbell. That's, of course, Jonathan Fjeld from the Racing Experts. Jonathan's a busy boy this week. Where are you going to be at this week, Jonathan?
So this weekend, I'm going to be at Phoenix Raceway. I'll be leaving the Land of Enchantment on Thursday evening, and I'm going to be out the track Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Going to cover the three main NASCAR series and also the ARCA West race. That is going to be so much fun. Big field, a lot of drivers in contention for the championship. Going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Championship 4, of course. And there's about 7 guys who are going to go for the ARCA West Championship. We'll catch up on all the news on the preview show on Thursday. Of course, Mitchell Brewer, and we may have someone new join the preview show. Yeah.
Hint, eh? Any?
Yeah. I haven't even told you about that.
Oh, all right.
All right.
Exciting.
Well, I'll find out later. But tonight, we want to talk about, we teased it last night on Twitter. Today, we're talking about Chip Ganassi Racing. Yes, Chip Ganassi Racing. I don't know if you heard, Jonathan, but this is their last race as a race team in NASCAR. Of course, Chip Ganassi Racing is obviously still going to be around. They still have their Extreme E team. They still have the IMSA team, which is going to be 2 cars next year. They also have their IndyCar team, which just won the championship with Alex Palou. Also Scott Dixon, Marcus Ericsson, and some guy named Jimmy Johnson. Yeah. So, but their NASCAR team is closing up shop. You may have heard back in June, it was announced that, which is basically the bombshell of all silly season announcements, that Chip Ganassi Racing was purchased by Justin Marks and Trackhouse. But before we get into the end, we have to start with the beginning. And that is where we turn over to you, Jonathan. How did this all start? What do you think about when they came into the sport, 2001? Chip Ganassi came in with Felix Sabates, who's already in the sport.
Mm-hmm. And Felix Sabates is someone I wanted to touch on just before we get into that. 2001. Of course, 2001 was a great start for Ganassi Racing, but you think about the 42 car that Ross Chastain has driven this past season. That car dates back all the way to 1989 when Kyle Petty did 18 races for Felix Sabates Racing. Of course, you may remember the 1982 Hooters 500 at Atlanta, where there were 5 guys in contention for the championship. Of course, Alan Kowicki, Davey Allison, Bill Elliott, Mark Martin, Kyle Petty. I believe Harry Gant was also in contention for that too. Kyle Petty driving a number 42 mellow yellow scheme that is as iconic as ever. That was Felix Sabates Racing. A lot of people, Team Sabco as they were called, a lot of people don't realize that, but Kyle Petty gave them a good run back in the 90s, really carried the banner for the team. He won, 4 races between 91 and 93. He also won 1 in 1990, 1 in 1995. Earned his final win, actually, with the team. And, he brought the team a lot of success. Joe Nemechek was able to kind of kickstart his Cup career with Team Sabco, really get off the ground, more than just a Xfinity runner who moved up to Cup. And then, as you mentioned, 2001 came along where Chip Ganassi wanting to venture into NASCAR with Dodge coming to the sport, offering up a really good deal. And of course, NASCAR booming at the time. Ray Evernham also coming in as a new owner. Really exciting. And, I really want to pay tribute to their first ever driver. Of course, it was Sterling Marlin who drove for them, but Jason Leffler, what a tremendous talent he was. Great dirt track racer, great pavement racer as well. Won a couple Xfinity races. Of course, we lost him back in 2013, but he won the pole for the inaugural Chicago race and didn't run the greatest in that 01 singular car, but it was a good start to the team. And actually, it was the inaugural Kansas race, but a good start to the team. Also, Sterling Marlin coming over there, having a career resurgence. Of course, we saw what happened in 2002, where he almost won the championship, had a couple injuries, took him out of the championship. And here comes the career of Jamie McMurray getting started with that great Charlotte finish and beating Bobby Labonte, which right now would be the equivalent, now for the newer fans, would be the equivalent of someone like Ty Gibbs, maybe, or someone like Josh Berry coming into the Cup Series, filling in for, let's say, like a Denny Hamlin, and beating Martin Truex Jr. at Charlotte. Like, that was huge for the time. So a lot of great moments from the team really early on.
And you get to that point in 2001, Dodge came back into the series, and it was a big deal. Ray Evernham was like, I'm starting this new team. And, it was a big deal at the time because, Bill Elliott was driving for the Evernham team. It was a big deal because he always drove Fords, and now he's driving another one. So that's big there. But really, 2003, 2004, 2005, as Jonathan goes off the screen for not sure what reason. Now he's back. But 2003, 2004, 2005, they get some more drivers. 2002, of course, there were some new guys. Of course, Jimmy Spencer in that Target car, that iconic. Of course, Target was a big part of Chip Ganassi racing, not just on the NASCAR side, but primarily on the IndyCar side of things as well. But overall, getting the Target brand on there. But really, it was Sterling Marlin, Casey Mears, Jamie McMurray. Those guys really carried the team throughout the second really hard of the early 2000s.
For sure. Casey Mears, he never won in that 41 car, but he had several good runs. He won some poles in that car. He almost won the 2005 season finale at Homestead, if not for a late race caution. And then also, just talking about Jamie McMurray, too, he had a tremendous season back in 2004. One of the best seasons of any non-playoff driver that we've seen since the chase got started. Actually, if you look at the regular season championship and like the full season championship, he would have finished top 5 in points in 2004, even despite missing the playoffs and finishing 11th in points. 9 top 5s, 23 top 10s, really proved his talent, was really good that season, was really good in 2005 as well. Just could never capitalize and win. And I think that was the only blemish on the team at that time, is they could never really close out a win. They were good. They had good speed. They were often battling each other. I don't know if you remember the 2004 All-Star Race Open.
Yeah.
Where it was Jeremy Mayfield, it was Jamie McMurray, it was Sterling Marlin, and I believe it was Jamie McMurray who made one of the greatest saves at Charlotte Motor Speedway coming off of turn 4, racing hard for the win. And, they put on a show, but they just could never get quite close enough. Also, another driver I want to touch on, too, who raced for them on the road course is Scott Pruitt as well. Scored a third place finish to Jeff Gordon back in 2004 at Sonoma, that number 39 car. I remember there was a clip from 2003 where I think it was Scott Pruitt and a couple other guys. It might have been another Ganassi car. It might have been a really rough day. I can't remember off the top of my head, but 3 cars spun in the old carousel corner at Sonoma Raceway, and they called it synchronized spinning. That's where the term originated from. But yeah, just some good memories and iconic schemes too. That's another thing. We had the Silver Bullet with Sterling Marlin. We had that flat black Texaco Havlin scheme. We had, of course, Jamie McMurray's home, I believe it was a home 1-2-3 scheme that was in Talladega Nights, where Jamie McMurray flips off Ricky Bobby. So a lot of, even though they didn't go to victory lane, there were a lot of iconic moments and a lot of iconic things that, we as, I don't want to say fans because we're both part of the media, but we're fans. There's a reason why we're in the media. We could remember from being fans back then that really stand out to us.
Yeah. Really. And then 2006 came along, Jamie McMurray goes to Roush. Reid Sorensen takes over the 41. Mears moves over to the 42. But I want to go over to 2007 was a big year for Chip Ganassi Racing. because at the time, and also 2005 was, when Sterling Marlin left. So 2006 was a big year because Reid Sorensen was in the 41, Casey Mears in the 42, and David Stremme in the 40. So a complete makeover of the team and what it looked like. But 2007 came along. The biggest story, I think, that year before the season is Juan Pablo Montoya, Formula One champion, coming over to run NASCAR. He also won the Indy 500 too. But that was a big deal when that was happening.
That was a big deal. And, I think Chip Ganassi Racing really needed something to revitalize the team, because having two rookies on the team, in addition to someone who was in their fourth season, was just not working. I mean, Reid Sorensen had some good runs. He almost won the fall Auto Club race in 2006. David Stremme didn't quite do as well, but just needed something to really revitalize the team, step in for Casey Mears was going to kind of leave a void. Juan Pablo Montoya, great way to fill that, because he came into the series really hitting the ground running. We saw him at Atlanta where he had a good finish there. We saw him have some other really good qualifying performances and good runs, good finishes. He won at Sonoma, of course, with the first ever road course race with the car tomorrow. And just really a breath of fresh air for a team that, as we'll touch on a little bit later, was kind of looking for some sort of second wind or revitalization. And Juan Pablo Montoya really brought that. Also, I want to give a shout out to Reid Sorensen. I mentioned his performance back in 2006 as well, but in 2007, he also ran well in the Brickyard 400, had some good runs. I still think Reid Sorensen is one of the underrated talents from that era. And as we'll talk about with the downfall of Ganassi, I think Reid got the worst of it.
Yeah. Well, I want to also touch on, I don't think we touched on this, but 2002, kind of going backwards. I was just thinking about this as we were talking about this. Sterling, gotta go back to Sterling Marlin, Silver Bullet stuff. You got to remember, he was in a championship. I don't know if we touched on this, but kind of go over that. But that was like their significant, that was the first kind of like big moment.
That was huge
for that team. And then his accident.
Yeah. I mean, Sterling Marlin, he had 2 wins, 8 top 5s, and 14 top 10s that season. He led the point standings. Of course, you may remember he can't do that, pulling the fender out under the red flag of the Daytona 500 that year in 2002. Led the most laps in the race, was well on his way to winning his third Daytona 500 till that happened. Still scored an 8th place finish, but he took the points lead in week 2 at Rockingham and did not relinquish it until Loudon, race 27 in September. He had a really good season. Consistent, good, strong, but just when it came down to it, that I think what really happened with Marlin was he had the accident at Richmond, which caused injuries to him. And then you can just see it in the performance, the 2 races after that. He just was not quite the same. And unfortunately, the Kansas crash really exacerbated those issues that he was having. And unfortunately for Sterling, that was about the last hurrah for, honestly, his whole career. It's really unfortunate because Sterling was a good driver in his prime. Of course, he won 2 consecutive Daytona 500s. He won, 4 races for Chip Ganassi Racing. So it was really too bad that run had to end like it did for Chip Ganassi Racing, and also competitively just for Sterling Marlin in general.
Okay. All right, let's go back to where we kind of left off after Montoya in 2007. 2008, another IndyCar driver came into the team. Dario Franchitti came in there. I know it didn't work out as well. Reid Sorensen was still there. Montoya was still there. But after really 2008, a big change happened entering the 2009 season.
It did, yeah. So, of course, Dario Franchitti, he often gets regarded as somewhat of a NASCAR bust, but you look at his performance in the Xfinity Series in 2018 or 2008 when he was driving for Chip Ganassi Racing. He led 106 laps. He led laps at Bristol. Had the injury at Bristol, or had the injury at Talladega, unfortunately, but it came at a bad time for Chip Ganassi Racing. They were having sponsorship woes. They were having issues. And then in 2009, they merged with DEI, of course, was having their own financial issues, came together, merged, formed Earnhardt Ganassi Racing. Chip got to take Dario for the IndyCar program. They got Martin Truex Jr. They kept Juan Pablo Montoya. They were going to have Eric Almirola on. That only lasted for about 7 races. And Juan Montoya managed to pull the best season of his Cup career out with the 2009 season. I don't think it gets talked about enough just how well he did that season, because there was one point where he was 4th in points, not too far away from the Hendrick cars, who were doing tremendous that season, especially at Auto Club Speedway too, where he had good performance and was close. And I think that really shows the talent that Juan Montoya had, just as a race car driver in general, but being able to adapt to the ovals and to NASCAR so well, to be able to run that well. So it was a good omen for switching over to a new configuration, making, I guess, diamonds out of cow manure, if you will. And then, of course, in 2010, you had Jamie McMurray come back to the team. He won the Daytona 500, 2 other races, inspired a whole rule change, allegedly. Of course, with the wild cards the next season. Juan won a race, and it was a good success for the team, just coming out of something that was so dark.
In 2010, it was actually a big year for that team because it's not just Jamie. He won the Brickyard 400 too. He won the Daytona 500. The team actually also won the Indy 500 that year with Dario. So Chip became the first one to win the Daytona 500, Brickyard 400, and the Indy 500 in the same year. I'm not sure if that ever is going. I mean, it still could happen again if the Brickyard decides to go back to the oval. I mean, Chip could do it. Roger could also do it. Who knows? But but I think 2010 was a big year for that, and also kind of it inspired the rule change with the wild card in the playoffs, and that's another whole discussion for another day. But really, 2011, 2012, 2013, the first half of that decade, you didn't really see a lot.
No. Yeah, the most top 10s any of those drivers scored was 9 top 10s in 2013 from Jamie McMurray. They were really off the grid. They just didn't live up to what they had done in 2009 and 2010, which is really unfortunate because I'm a firm believer in Juan Pablo Montoya's talent when it comes to NASCAR stock cars, and I don't think we ever got to see that fully. We saw glimpses of it in 2013 when Ganassi was starting to turn the corner and they really caught on to the Gen 6 car. But we never saw a season like what 2009 was for him. And I think that's really unfortunate because unfortunately there was a small incident, an infamous incident in 2012 that a lot of people like to refer back to. And I think that, a lot of people know Juan Pablo Montoya's talent, but a lot of people also point to that incident so many times when it wasn't even his own making. Right. Mechanical error that happened, and I think it really takes away from just the talent he had and everything that he brought to the table for the team.
Yeah, and JPM has gone on to do some great things after that. I mean,
huge.
Winning an Indy 500, of course, and had a pretty successful IMSA career after that. I know he's still doing a lot of stuff. He's racing. I know he's got his vested in his son's career as well. He left the team in 2013, but coming in, Kyle Larson going, of course, to the 42. That was a big deal at that time.
That was a big deal. I remember many people in the sport were questioning, what is Chip Ganassi doing? We had just seen Joey Logano burnout at Joe Gibbs Racing after not getting a full season in Xfinity and moving up to Cup and not doing well in Cup. And now you have Kyle Larson coming in and he's going to run full time in the Cup Series after not even having barely, I mean, he ran Xfinity, but barely any experience in the lower series. You know, what is Chip Ganassi doing? But he had a pretty good rookie season. I mean, he placed top of the non-playoff cars. He scored a good average finish that was better than anything any of the Chip Ganassi racing drivers had done in the previous seasons. Led some laps, battled with Jeff Gordon, Brad Keselowski, and Kevin Harvick at Chicago. Took the lead from Kyle Busch at, I think it was Kyle Busch at Charlotte. Had some really good runs, really proved that he belonged in the series. Of course, there were some learning curves. Next season was not as good, but he really showed his talent. And Jamie McMurray had a really good season too. He didn't win, but he had several races where he was up there contending for the lead, battling it out. I remember many times where Jeff Gordon and Jamie McMurray, it seemed like they had magnets on each other.
Yeah.
At various points in races where they'd be battling each other inside the top 5 and top 10. Remember at Kansas, they even got together at one point. You know, Jamie McMurray had a really good season, led 368 laps. I think he almost won at Bristol as well in the fall. So Kyle Larson coming over that team, it really gave them a boost.
Yeah, it did. So, 2016, Larson gets his first win. Then he kind of takes off in 16 and 17. And then, I know not a good year in 2018 for that team, which kind of inspired another change. Because usually a lot of teams, and we go after young drivers, but when a certain someone becomes available, it's an opportunity you cannot pass up. And in 2019, that team, Chip Ganassi Racing, did something just that. Of course, the signing of Kurt Busch. Well, I remember when this was going to happen, and people were like, "Wow, this is a big deal."
Mm-hmm. One of the many times where I think people thought Kurt Busch was going to retire, but did not. Some people have been joking that we've seen Kurt Busch's final win 3 or 4 times already now, and he had a good 2019 season. Like you mentioned in 2018, sure, Kyle Larson had a good season. He didn't win, but, Jamie McMurray didn't have as good of a season, like you mentioned. And Kurt Busch coming in there just with the talent and expertise that he brought to the team really added something else to the team, similar to what Kyle Larson did, but in kind of a different way, more of like a kind of roughing out the edges, smoothing out the edges. Kyle Larson was able to make the playoffs, of course, for, 4th season in a row. Kurt was able to make the playoffs as well with the win at Kentucky, where he battled his brother out, and the whole team got to climb on the car and ride back to Victory Lane, which was one of the coolest Victory Lane celebrations we've seen in recent times.
Yeah.
And good season for Kurt, brought Monster over, had a good season. Honestly, that's about it that I can say about the season. It was good performance, just a good boost for the team, really, to kind of even out a bit of a downward slope that they had been on in 2018.
Right. So we go to last year. Obviously, we all know what happened last year. 2 things. 1, the pandemic. 2, Kyle Larson. We don't need to go over what happened with him. But when Larson had what happened with him go out there, in came Matt Kenseth.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That shocked everybody as everyone was hunkering down in their homes and trying to not get COVID. And what was that? I mean, that year was crazy and really all sorts of the way.
It was not a good year for Matt Kenseth. Point blank. 32 race. I was looking up the stat on this, and I honestly forgot that Matt Kenseth ran 32 races in 2020 because the performance just was not there. And I think it's just because Matt had one less year of experience with the 550 package. He was even quoted as saying, I don't know how they ran this package for a year and decided to bring that back. He didn't feel comfortable with the car. It just wasn't a good combination. It just didn't work out for Matt. We did see him run well at Indianapolis. He almost won. That was a cool moment. You know, he finished top 10 in his first ever race, but it just wasn't a good season. But honestly, when you consider everything that team had been through, just between the pandemic, like you mentioned, and between the controversy with Kyle Larson, they really just needed a solid driver to get some solid performances and make the sponsors happy. And I think Matt Kenseth did exactly that because, you know, you look at who all was sponsoring, you know, the 42 team, Credit One Bank, McDonald's, Clover, you know, a lot of these sponsors stayed with the team as it transitioned into 2021. And it wasn't a good season, but it was the best that they could do. And Kurt Busch still got a win out of it, as he usually does.
Probably one of the biggest wins of Kurt Busch's career happened at Las Vegas and advanced him to the round of 8. That's a big deal to get.
Huge.
That was a big deal at the time. And then this year, really, it was, I mean, they didn't start off well, but then really after it was announced that that Trackhouse purchased Chip Ganassi Racing, the team started to perform better. You're out there, Kurt Busch getting that win in Atlanta. Knowing that, as you joked with me, it's like, oh, it's Kurt Busch's final win. Oh no. Like his third final win, you said. And then Ross Chastain in the 42 has had some pretty good runs this year. But overall, as the team enters into this final race, what will you remember from this season? And I'll ask you another broader question.
Well, I think the biggest thing I'll remember from this season is how well Kurt Busch started off those first couple races. He had a 4th place finish at the Daytona Road Course, had good performance. Yeah. He had a good run at Homestead, but then the team absolutely took a nosedive over the next few races, of course, from Las Vegas to the Coca-Cola 600 where Kurt had the issues, then started to pick the performance back up at Sonoma. I remember following this, and Kurt was able to make up something like 80 points on Chris Buescher for the cutoff spot over a course of, I think it was 3 or 4 races between Sonoma and Pocono, and was able to actually get into the playoffs on points. He didn't even need to win at Atlanta, but was able to hold off his brother. Again, they seem to, like I mentioned with Jamie McMurray and Jeff Gordon, they seem to have magnets on each other and really exciting finishes. Held off his brother at Atlanta, had a really dominating win. It was the first time since 2015 that Kurt Busch had won a race after leading the most laps. It was a surprise win. Even going into the day, I'm talking about like this happened years ago, but going into the day, you thought, okay, Kurt's going to have a good run. This is a good track for him. Atlanta is, it's good for the veterans, but not to the extent he had where he led 144 of 260 laps. And I think just what I remember most about this season is that performance that Kurt had. You probably remember this too. Richmond, during the playoffs, came into it 4th in points after a good 6th place finish at Darlington. And he was going to move on to the next round, maybe even be a sleeper for the round of 8, just like he had been in 2020. Had the tire issue, took him out after the round of 16. That was the end of it. But, just overall a good season for Kurt, even if the points position and some of the stats don't necessarily reflect it.
Yeah. All right. One last race for Chip Ganassi Racing. What's the biggest thing that you're going to remember from watching that team all those years?
Ooh, my childhood. My childhood of seeing the silver bullet, number 40. I think watching Juan Pablo Montoya win his first race, watching Juan Pablo Montoya's career in general, and collecting the diecast, of course, and Jamie McMurray's win to revitalize his career, Kyle Larson lifting up the team, a lot of good moments from the team, and it's going to be unfortunate to see them go. Casey, I'm going to turn the tables. What is one thing you're going to remember about Chip Ganassi Racing?
Well, this is I'm going to remember Jamie's Daytona 500 win. I'm going to remember all the wins that they had in 2010. I'm going to remember the early, the last 3 years, really just Kurt coming in there and revitalizing that team. It's I'm going to remember the team that launched Kyle Larson's career. They're doing, he came in there and really dominated with the stuff that they had, and they made it work time after time after time. It's just incredible. And on the professional side, I've always had a great relationship with Chip Ganassi Racing. On the NASCAR side, as well as on the IndyCar and IMSA side. And two people I want to give credit to. I want to thank Jeff Dowling, and I want to thank Davis Schaefer, the PR.
I knew you were going to mention Davis.
Yep. Davis Schaefer, of course, the PR rep for the 42 team. Jeff, of course, who's been with the 1 team for many years. Jeff and Davis have been very, very good to me over the years, and, accommodating me with, getting to talk to Kurt, Ross, Jamie early on. It was a big deal, and it was always, they've always been great to me. And I wish them the best. I'm awesome to get to continue to work with Chip Ganassi Racing on the IndyCar side. Of course, the great Amy Stockover's there, of course, the longtime PR rep of Jimmy Johnson. She's over there and obviously done an incredible job along with Kelby and that entire team over at Chip Ganassi. John Olgan as well. Just big shout out to all those guys. And this is a team that's given me a lot over the years. So thank you to Chip Ganassi Racing for always supporting myself and as well as all the media to them with coverage. But
yeah. And while we're on the topic of remembering too, I want to go back to the 1990s, the late 1990s, of course, in 2000, where we had Kenny Irwin Jr. was one of the drivers for Team Sabco. Of course, he started out his career with Yates Racing, moved over to the number 42 after the Yates stint didn't work out. Had decent results with Sabco, and unfortunately, of course, we lost Kenny Irwin Jr. back in 2000 at New Hampshire, and so that's another thing I also want to remember with the team too, is just being able to give him a second chance. And it's very unfortunate we didn't get to see that second chance pan out, but condolences and remembrances, of course, to the memory of Kenny Irwin Jr., who was incredible talent.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, you're going to be there at Chip Ganassi Racing's final race. Of course, the assets from the team will be shifted over to Trackhouse immediately after the 2021 season is over. So, of course, Chip Ganassi Racing still going to be around. Of course, on the IndyCar side, the IMSA side, I know they do a lot of stuff with the Extreme E team. So Chip Ganassi Racing will live on, but the NASCAR team, of course, this is goodbye. You never know; they could come back, but for now, it's going to be sad to see them go. We're not done with this yet. Tomorrow we have another special. We'll talk about that tomorrow. We'll talk to you then.